Hi, I'm Seriously, Taiwan Matters. I'm Taiwanese American, now living in Europe. And these are my guinea pigs. They crunch vegetables with more zest than I talk about Taiwan. And that is saying a lot. Today, I want to talk about what it was like growing up in an authoritarian regime, Taiwan. Most people know Taiwan as a democracy, but our first real presidential election was in 1996. Taiwan has been democratic for about as long as we've had DVDs. If you don't know what those are, ask your parents. Before that, we lived under nearly 40 years of martial law, the longest in the world. Taiwan wasn't just ruled by one party, the KMT. It was ruled by one family, the Jiangs. Sounds terrible, like North Korea, right? Except it didn't feel that way. In fact, I thought we already had democracy. If that sounds ridiculous, that's because you're looking from the outside. Inside an authoritarian state, your sense of reality gets distorted by design because you are fed a consistent narrative for your entire life. And it sounds like this. You have freedom, the kind tailored to your culture. You have a good life thanks to the ruling party or ruler. You're safe under the party because it takes care of danger from any direction. And this playbook works surprisingly well even today because it's an active system that feeds stories to mess with your mind, so your logic and emotions reject anything that contradicts this reality. Look at China, ruled by Xi Jinping, with no term limits. Yet, plenty of Chinese will argue they have more freedoms and a better life than Americans, even though they can't choose their leaders. No free press. Nearly half the country lives on less than 1,000 renminbi a month, not even enough to rent a room in mid-sized cities. And when some climb over the Great Firewall to get online. Many still believe Tiananmen Square massacre, Uyghur camps, even organ harvesting in China are fake news. That's how powerful an authoritarian story can be. So let me show you how it worked in Taiwan by explaining the three paradoxes about freedom, quality of life, and safety. So here's the first paradox: freedom without freedom. In authoritarian Taiwan, you actually felt free. In school, we were taught that we lived in a democracy because the Republic of China was founded on Dr. Sun's three principles of nationalism, democracy, and livelihood of the people. And in daily life, my family could go anywhere, do what we wanted to, whenever. No curfews, no police harassing you. So it confirmed the narrative that our freedom was protected by democracy. The only thing you couldn't do was criticize the ruling party, the KMT. Complaining a little, like about bad roads, high taxes, or the school system, was fine. But don't go crazy and start asking why they were the only ones allowed to run the government. As for the leaders, both President Chiang Kai-shek and Jiang Jingguo, there was no reason to criticize them, right? All we ever heard were good things about what they had done for the people. I, like many kids, ended school essays with something like, "I'm grateful to President Jiang and strive to make him proud." It was a guaranteed high note no teacher could mark down. So it was a big shock when I moved to the US in the mid-80s. Kids in my class called Reagan a bad actor and a worse president. I thought, wow, Americans take freedom of speech way too far, and no respect for B-movie legends either. How can a president have any authority if even kids could criticize him? Sound familiar? Cultural differences used as an excuse to demand absolute obedience to the leader. Phrase disrespect. The Chinese Communist Party still does that today. We have freedom of speech and democracy, tailored to Chinese culture. And that's the trick of the authoritarian. It gives you everyday freedoms, so you don't demand the one freedom that actually matters, the freedom to choose your own government. That's like piling toppings on a table without dough and try to call that pizza. And the second paradox is this: all credit, no blame. When life gets better under an authoritarian, you think the system must be working, but the cause and effect is flipped. Authoritarians usually grab power when people are most vulnerable, like after a war. Life had hit rock bottom, so the only way was up, through people's hard work, not because of control. Take my parents as an example. They grew up in Taiwan after World War II. My father fled to Taiwan in 1949. My mother was born under Japanese rule. Their education was disrupted, food was scarce. Like most young people then, they worked during the day, study at night, and claw their way toward a better life. Eventually they met, got married, and started a family. So even under martial law, their quality of life improved, not because of authoritarianism, but because they poured everything into surviving and raising kids. But when there's a problem, the authoritarian is never to blame. Look at China now, blaming their economic crash on the US tariffs and tech ban, on anti-Chinese sentiments in the West, anything but the party or Xi Jinping. Well, you'd better not blame them if you're still using your organs. And of course, you can't vote the party out to see if things improve, like you could in a democracy. The third paradox is this: clarity without truth still feels safe. The state always had one clear story. They were the good guys, anyone arrested was a spy or a rebel. Taiwan's media was controlled by the state under martial law, so there was no one to argue otherwise. Even asking questions was dangerous. So you accepted what the government said and moved on. But the clarity was fake. It was like blinders on a horse. They gave you a clear path straight ahead, but kept you from seeing the danger all around. My mom remembers 4 people she personally knew being taken away in the 50s and 60s, accused of being spies. All but one never returned. No one really knew why. But one thing was clear: crossing the red line was very bad for your health. In my mom's case, it meant avoiding doing whatever set those people apart. No martial arts, no book clubs, no government jobs. Everyone had their own examples of what not to do, so the whole society self-censored and shrank back. This paradox, clarity without truth, works really well for the authoritarian because it's comforting to believe the good guys are in charge. And it feels less scary than asking, what if the government isn't the good guys? Despite these paradoxes, sometimes the authoritarian trick backfires. The forced narrative cracks, opening people's eyes just a little. Here's the most famous example in Taiwan, called the Formosa incident. It is commonly seen as a pivotal event that propelled Taiwan from authoritarianism to democracy. In 1979, Formosa magazine was formed, the first openly critical voice of the KMT, during martial law, which was already an extremely dangerous move. They gained popularity quickly. So when they organized a parade to honor Human Rights Day in Kaohsiung, a southern city of Taiwan, the tension was already high between the government and the organizers. The crackdown was violent, but TV only showed demonstrators attacking police. So public sympathy was with the government. Many were arrested, but one leader escaped, which led to an island-wide manhunt that lasted 26 days into January 1980. I was in elementary school then, and quite scared of this violent criminal potentially loose in our neighborhood, so the public cheered when he was captured. But the manhunt was so massive, it drew international attention, especially from Western democracies. To prove their narrative and look transparent, the ruling party, the KMT, decided to put the magazine's leaders, the Kaohsiung 8, on military trial, and for the first time televised the trial and published transcripts. They imagined that when the public saw these people in handcuffs, in shame, and heard the gory details of how they tried to overthrow the government, it served as a stern warning to all not to sympathize with criminals. However, what the KMT didn't expect was what followed. The public saw an image that conflicted with the picture of violent criminals as portrayed by the government. The arrested stood tall, confident, even relaxed in handcuffs. And because they expected the death penalty, they gave impassioned statements about their vision for democracy and freedom. The public saw articulate and courageous idealists, which shocked them out of their comfort zone, like blinders ripped off a horse. For many Taiwanese, this was the first time they heard a powerful, relatable narrative that made them wonder, was there a better way forward for Taiwan? I'm glad Taiwan has a happy ending. It transitioned into a democracy, thanks to the sacrifices of too many people. If you've never lived in an authoritarian state, I hope my experience shows you how the system really works. China may have facial recognition toilets, but Taiwan has something actually worth having: freedom and democracy. Please subscribe and check out our other videos.